Hey everyone, we are live. Welcome to the weekly show of Classroom Without Walls, using technology to reimagine education. My name is I am the host of this weekly show. I created this show because I believe our society has changed a lot. Social media and technology play a huge role in our changing society. On this show, as educators, we need to embrace this digital transformation and start to change how we teach and how we interact with our students. On this show, I interview leading professionals like David Holzmer and professors regarding how they use technology and social media as an educational tool. If you are new to the show, hey, Des is here. Thank you very much for checking us out. If you are a returning attendee, I always want to thank you for your support. And if you are watching this on replay, thank you, future people. I appreciate you. Today, it is truly my honor to introduce David Holzmer as our guest of honor. David is a consultant and executive advisor for his own consulting agency. And David is also an IBM Futurist. And he has recently completed his Ph.D. in ethical and creative leadership. And David is also a blogger and a live streamer. I love his content on a personal level. David is a dear friend of mine for a few years. And every time when I have a conversation with him, I can always learn so much from him and become smarter and wiser. So I feel so honored that you are with us today, David, and welcome to the show.
Oh my word. Thank you, I, so much. As I've been telling you from the moment I knew that this was going to happen, I've been so excited, and just because of it's you, and I love what's going on with your show, and I'm a fan of the show. I've been watching it and really love the energy here and the engagement. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Do you want to add anything to my brief introduction?
Oh my word. No, I when you were saying all those things, what was going, it's when you're doing them, it's one thing, but then when somebody else sort of reads them out to you, I'm saying to myself, when do I sleep? It's no, but thank you. That was wonderful.
Okay, awesome. So, and we have some people here. If you can tell us where you are joining us from, and so that I can say hi to you. And I know we have a very global community here. So I really want to know where you are joining us from. And and please feel free to type your own questions. And we all know how amazing David is. So we definitely don't want to miss any time or this chance to ask him any questions. So we are just going to get started. Are you ready, David?
I am ready. I am very, very excited for this time together. Yes.
Awesome. So you have a very impressive presence on Twitter. How did you build your network on Twitter over time? And what are some top strategies and tactics that you want to share with us so that maybe we can have as this good as you a Twitter presence?
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, Twitter was really the first social media platform that I really grabbed a hold of and made a conscious attempt to build. And the reason that I did that is, first and foremost, for me, Twitter has always been a learning tool. I've always seen it more as sort of a source of information than really, it only sort of dawned on me later that this was a social media platform and about connecting and building a network and so forth. But I'm a relentlessly curious person, and I get very, very, very excited when I see new information that explains the world to me or helps me understand things. And so early on with Twitter, one of the things that I noticed was that I could use the Twitter search feature to look for topics or ideas that I was interested in, and it made it was good that, because at the time that I was doing this, I was also, at that time, I don't think I was in my PhD program yet. I think I was in my master's degree program when I started on Twitter, and there was just so much cool information going on about on Twitter about different approaches to leadership and management. And so what I would do was I would just type in searches. And then when I would see something that interested me, I would, like, for me, learning is very much a contact sport. You know, I get very excited about things and I want to talk to people and I want to engage with them. So I would see people talking about things like complexity and disruption, and I didn't know anything about them, but I knew that they sort of felt like they described what I was living through in my own work life. And so I would, like, type out, I'd be like, hey, how, that's really cool. Can you tell me more about that? And I would develop these relationships, and they would say, well, follow this person or that person. And then I learned when I find something cool, I would retweet it. And, and what I found is that I started to develop a following. People wanted to, follow what I was doing, but it was really just my own learning journey.
That's great. It seems like social media played a huge role, especially Twitter. So can you elaborate more on, like, how Twitter specifically helps you? Because I remember when we were chatting that you mentioned that Twitter helps you build a network and basically kind of helps you and identify or construct your dissertation. So can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. One of the things, and again, I think it has to do with just the way that I'm wired, because I'm definitely ADD. My mind goes all over the place. And so when I was in my PhD program, it's first of all, I was in an interdisciplinary program, which was great. But I'm the type of person, I need interdisciplinarity on steroids, because my head goes all over the place and I see connections. Because when you think about it, and I don't want to digress too much, but the world doesn't operate by disciplines. The world operates the way the world operates. And we create these disciplines and we think they're these sort of fixed categories, like life only happens in sociology, like sociology only happens in sociology, and life, of course, doesn't work that way. And my mind would follow all these connections, and Twitter was such a great place for that. And I can tell you, here's one of the things that I did, and I would highly, highly recommend this if there are topics or ideas that you're interested in, is I remember when, what was it? There was TweetDeck. I think that might still be around. And then Hootsuite. Now, I don't use TweetDeck anymore, but I use Hootsuite. And the thing that I loved about that platform is that it allowed you to read or watch multiple columns or multiple streams of tweets at a given moment. And what I would do, and it also allowed you to customize those streams. So what I would do is I would set up, like, let's say I would set up a stream that would have like disruption, the word disruption and organization. So anytime somebody tweeted something and they used the word disruption or organization, it would show up in that stream. So I would create almost these nets. It was like a fishing net that would grab for me anything related to that. And so after a while, I realized that there were certain people who were tweeting about organizations and disruption all the time. And I would follow them and get to know them. And I would ask them, well, what books are important to you? And what are you excited about right now? And they would say, well, I'm reading this book, but the person you need to follow is so-and-so because they tweet about this stuff all the time. And so it really helped me create a network where I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know I was creating a network. I just liked to be like connected to people who liked the same things I did. So that really helped me. And then what I found is when it came time to actually, by that, eventually I was doing my PhD and my dissertation. What I found was that that community, how they informed me and informed my thinking, ended up playing a huge, huge role in how I approached my dissertation and how I approach my thinking about organizations today. It's very much that sort of like ADD type of sort of cross-pollinating, because I think that those are the solutions that we need.
Yes, that is an amazing tip. And Julia is here. Hi, Julia. And Julia is the CEO of...
Hi, Julia.
Yes, she was a guest. And she said that's an amazing tip, using TweetDeck or Hootsuite to monitor content. I love that. It seems you are so good at listening and paying attention to what is going on in our environment. And I'm going to try this.
It's really, I would highly recommend it. And, one of the things about Twitter, too, is that each social platform, I've learned, has its own culture. And the thing I like about Twitter is that there are a lot of readers there. It's a very literate culture, and I'm not inferring that the other platforms are illiterate. I'm not saying that, but of course, like Instagram is more visual, and whereas Twitter is more literate. And so there are a lot of people like tweeting, like URLs that will take you to articles and books and things like that. And that's the stuff that interests me, that sort of deep knowledge. And I find a lot of that on Twitter.
Yes, that is amazing. No wonder you have such an impressive presence on Twitter. Thank you so much. And my next question for you, David, is that you discuss a lot about change in your writing and in your live streaming content. And correct me if I'm wrong. So it seems one of your central arguments is that change and disruptions have almost become the norm instead of exceptions. So my question for you is that in this turbulent environment, how can people like me, educators, best prepare our students for their future? And how can people like join us watching the show as individuals best prepare for their future in today's super chaotic, turbulent environment?
Wow, there's a question. On the one hand, I don't know exactly what to do to prepare for the future, but I think a lot of it stems from our attitudes and our conversations and our assumptions. And I think the first thing that we do need to do is recognize, first and foremost, there is a lot of disruption, but the truth of the matter is the only difference between now and times in the past is things move so much more quickly, but there was always disruption before. It's just that it moved at such a slow pace. We never noticed it. And one of the things, and so we have a lot of assumptions about the world that are based on almost this mechanistic mindset, this sort of Newtonian notion of predictability, and that everything is going to move at this same pace, and that life will be predictable and moves in predictable cycles. And I think we have to be sort of relentless about looking at how we create those assumptions for ourselves and how we put them forth. So as educators, one of the things that I think is important is to really, this is where I think I was blessed in my PhD program, is that my professors really encouraged an interdisciplinary approach. They really encouraged us to look to other resources and to look to other types of thinking and to look to other types of medium, not just scholarly writing, to inform our thinking. And one of the things that I see that, because I still, interact in academia, is that there tends to be this subtle kind of exclusivity, meaning that I think sometimes professors, because they will engage in this notion of, in order to make my argument right, all the other arguments need to be wrong. I don't know if you've encountered that, but it's like, for instance, I once did a training with this psychology professor, and he believed that everything was psychology, to the point where anything dealing with psychiatry was nonsense, and he sort of framed everything as a problem of human psychology. And he was so dismissive of other disciplines or other lenses or other ways of seeing things. And I think we do such a disservice to ourselves and to our students by not encouraging them to be adventurous and not encouraging them to sort of cross-pollinate thought. Because I think that the solutions that we most need right now are going to come about through combining and sharing and connecting ideas that don't exist yet. So I think we have to be open to that process.
Yes. So in that sense, do you think, when students go to schools, or like for our own work titles, we have like specializations and areas of concentrations or majors or whatever. So do you think those like titles or like maybe limitations in terms of what we do are still relevant, or we should break away from those things that seem to confine or define us? What's your take on this?
I think it's really, I think, well, that's a great question. And again, I think it really goes back to attitude. And I think it has to do with curiosity versus dismissiveness. And let me put it another way. God forbid this happens, but if I were in an automobile accident and I needed, and my leg was broken, I want a doctor who specialized in fixing legs. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna, it's great if you're a surgeon and you know poetry, but I don't care about your poetry. I want you to fix my leg. So, I mean, I'm making a joke, but the truth of the matter is, I think, again, what is important, and I think it gets to a lot of things, is not necessarily the discipline, but the mindset. And we used to, and I think the other thing that needs to shift so much is the sense of identity that people ascribe to a particular discipline. I think what we have to do is continue and what I mean by that is there can tend to be a lot of assumptions that go with I'll give you an example. A lot of assumptions that go with a particular discipline and how you solve problems. And I think we have to expand beyond that. And here's my example. When I was, when I was doing my master's degree, I was in a traditional leadership program. My master's degree is in nonprofit leadership. And what I noticed is that there were so many assumptions about sort of this heroic image of the leader and what somebody with a master's degree in leadership should do and how they should be. And I found that to be a limitation because the things that interested me was I was interested in leadership behavior and organizational behavior, and I wanted to understand them more deeply. So what I started reading was I started reading psychology. I started reading Jung and the depth psychologist and sociology. I started reading those things, which typically are not, they're covered in some leadership programs, but they're not covered in a lot of them. That's seen as almost like an outside influence. And I sort of, by the time I got to my PhD program, they were more open to that type of thinking, but they certainly weren't when I was in my master's degree.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if that makes sense. I feel like I was all over the map there, but
No, definitely makes sense. And I love the joke, the example you made, which is very cool. And that you definitely made your point across, and that curiosity, which is also something I try to protect in my own children, to always be curious and to have that open mind. And so, yeah, I love it. Yes.
If I can say this, because this also segues into, just as an aside, it segues into the work that I'm doing now, the things I'm developing right now, and it has to do with our craving for certainty, because there's no doubt, and I'm actually reading a wonderful book now by Dr. David Rock, who talks about our neurological need. Our brains are wired to need certainty and the stability that affords us. However, I think for so long we have found our certainty by thinking that some ideas or some things are fixed and finite. Like, for instance, the discipline of leadership, or what it takes to be a leader. There's one idea about what that's supposed to be, and you're supposed to be this sort of John Wayne figure, and all-knowing, all-wise. And the truth of the matter is that type of certainty, fixing it in ideas or presumptions about how people should act, that today is a limitation. Where we need to find our certainty is not in concepts and not in practices, but in relationships, in the people around us, in the trust and the reciprocity and the safety that we have with those around us. And if we can anchor our certainty in those things, we become far better able to navigate the uncertainty or the disruption in our environment and in our ideas.
Yes, that is such a great point. And I feel like, especially in American culture, and we always have this, we really have these craving for order, and you want everything to be in perfect order, this craving for perfection, and like you want to predict as much as possible in terms of future. And in communication, we even have a theory which is called uncertainty reduction theory. So what that means is that when human beings are engaging in interpersonal communication, and our goal is to reduce our uncertainty in terms of our interaction. So the questions we ask is to reduce our uncertainty, our fear about this person. So it is so true. Yeah. So that is a great point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's to the point now where I think that a lot of the disruption that we are seeing, I mean, the part of it's inevitable, but part of it is actually being caused by this need to keep things fixed and orderly. It's almost like you've got a car that is on a hill, and it wants to roll down the hill, but you've got this sort of rope behind it or something that's holding it. And eventually the rope breaks and the car goes downhill. Well, that's our need to hold on to certainty, is sort of like that rope. We've got this force that's pulling us in another direction, but we want to hold on. And I think, to, like Bruce Lee, didn't he say, like, be like water, flow like water?
Yes,
and I think that we need that.
Yes, which is, we hear this a lot in Eastern philosophy. The highest quality of human being is being like water. You can go upstream and you can go downstream, and then you can be really malleable. And yes, the water metaphor is used a lot. And Darren is here. He was just resonating with what you were talking about earlier, David. And he also talks about empathy and emotional intelligence, which we are going to discuss very soon.
Cool.
Yeah, so thank you for the comment. And so here's my next question, David. One of your many impressive titles is being a futurist for IBM. So
Yes.
what does that mean? Can you tell us what does this title entail? What does it mean by calling yourself a futurist for IBM? And what do you think about the future of our work?
Oh my. Well, I think a couple things. First of all, that is sort of a cool thing that happened, and I want to say this too. The IBM, this is about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was. IBM reached out to me and asked me to participate in some of the programs that they had going on. And but I want to just segue back a second to another thing we were talking about. IBM reached out to me as a direct result of my activity on Twitter. And
Wow.
somebody at IBM or somebody connected with IBM saw that I was tweeting a lot about disruption and the future of work. And so based on that, one day out of the blue, I got an email from IBM asking me if I wanted to be one of their futurists / influencers. And what it really entailed is IBM was curious at that time about how professionals were using social media, and specifically how they were using it in terms of their thinking about the future and how they were looking at the future of work. And so what they wanted some people to come in, and there was a large group. Well, there was probably about 25 or 30 of us. And I met who I met through that was Brian Fanzo. Brian Fanzo was a part of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And Daniel Newman and other people who are, very much influencers today. I met Brian through that. And but anyway, that was a wonderful experience. I still, we still connect from time. Myself and IBM, they'll still reach out to me, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing anything with them in the near future, but I can tell you about the future of work, though, and this was something that came up a lot when I did that work with IBM. And I think one of the things that is going on with the future of work is that the boundaries and the ideas about what work is and what it means in our life they're really becoming very sort of wobbly and fluid. And what I mean is that we talk about the separation of work life and home life or family life. And I think that it's those distinctions, as we can see, are not as clean cut as they once were. But I also think on another level, it's not just how we spend our time, it's where our thinking and our growth really is emerging from. And what I mean by this is that I think to a certain extent, like traditionally, notions of professional growth and psychological growth have existed in two very separate worlds. I may do something to elevate myself professionally. I might go to a conference, or I might take a training class or something. And then there are the things that I might do to elevate myself spiritually or psychologically. I might go to see a therapist, or I might go to church, or I might pray, or I might meditate. And I think what we're increasingly finding, especially given the complex nature of the challenges that we face, is that those pursuits are going to have to come together. Because I think for some of the most difficult and complex problems we have, I think we're only going to be able to tune into them if we allow ourselves to surrender to the emotional journey they require of us. And I guess what I'm saying is, for me, the future of work is such that we can no longer separate our professional growth from our spiritual and psychological growth. They are intertwined. So I think that's
I love it. Yeah. I love everything you mentioned here. And I think for a very long time, we really see this linear like divide between our spiritual pursuit, our personal and the professional. So what you are saying is that everything is kind of like coming together. Is that right?
I really see that. I really see this sort of, and that's the reason why I think people, especially in organizations, are so confused, because everybody's used to putting things in these neat little boxes. This exists here, this exists there, and suddenly there's all this disruption happening. And the only way we are going to solve these problems is to really come together and tear those walls down and look at things sort of with fresh eyes. I will give you an example. Like, for instance, we have one of the things that organizations deal with is they call them wicked problems or super wicked problems. Very, very complex problems with a lot of moving parts. And at the same time, okay, so we've got that over here. Now, over on the other side, what we have is employee disengagement, people not wanting to be at work, not wanting to be in their jobs. Gallup just did a poll. 87% of workers feel either disengaged or highly disengaged from their employment. And I think, well, you've got these two problems. Maybe these problems are related, meaning that maybe the solutions to these highly complex problems, these super wicked problems, has to do with tapping into the inner lives of these people that are disengaged and don't want to be in their jobs. Because I think what happens is we have to separate ourselves so much, and there's so much that we can't bring to our work, and there's so much that we have to be careful that we don't say and that we don't offer. And I think that all those roadblocks tend to shut people down. So one of the things that I'm seeing, for example, is that you mentioned emotional intelligence a little earlier. And I think one of the things that's happening in our culture is that even though you might see different things on the media, I think as a whole, we are becoming a more emotionally intelligent culture. I think we are becoming a more compassionate culture. I think we are becoming a more psychologically attuned culture. However, I don't know if our institutions and our organizations are keeping up with that. And I think that plays a role in this intense level of disengagement that you see, is that people are shut down. And at the same time, you see these problems that we have that require such a sort of a refined sense of emotional awareness and so much empathy, because ultimately when you have complex problems, it's not like about a jet engine that's broken or something. There's people involved, and there are usually people with their own feelings and their own aspirations and their own agendas. And what we need is the emotional attunement that would open people up and energize people, and a new way of collaborative problem solving, so that people can come together and tap into those deeper parts of themselves that now do not have an opportunity to come to the forefront. I think by doing that, by creating organizations that allow that, what we will do is tap into a level of creativity and collaborative sense making that will unearth these deeper sources of wisdom that we just do not have access to at this time.
Wow, that is deep. And you should definitely go out and educate those leaders, David, so that we can have more organizations like what you are describing here. It is so amazing. People are resonating with what you are saying. And Robert is here. And hey, Robert, thank you for being with us. And he was talking about earlier, we were talking about being perfection and perfectionist. And so he was commenting on that, meaning that perfection doesn't really exist.
Exactly.
And yes, and Darren was just saying yes, and like resonating on many of your comments. And
yes.
Oh, I love this comment from Darren. like hire me, not just my skills, but take me as a whole package, as a like holistic individual. Oh my God, I love that. It is so true.
It is very
so
true. It is very true indeed.
And here's a long comment from Robert. Can you read it, David?
Yes, we are becoming more of a personalized culture.
Personalized culture. People want the personalization for themselves, whether it is a product or service. They don't want to be one of those thousands that fit in the. It is so true. It is so true.
Really, and there is a bit of a Darwinian dynamic going on with that, Robert, because it really is going to be. I wouldn't say survival of the fittest, but survival of the most attuned. Because look at what Amazon is able to do with the purchasing experience, how they are able to personalize that. I think that's a key reason why they are such a dominant force in the marketplace today.
Yes, and I think that personalization is what many people struggle in higher education. It's in a way, higher education is like streamlined. We want to educate students, but at the same time, there's this demand for personalization, personalized teaching. And just like thinking about like reading this point makes me think of that. And even just myself, I am a professor, but I am also a very non-traditional professor. I really don't know like where is the box I can put myself in. I'm just like somewhere in between. Even my identity, I'm not a Chinese, I'm not American, even though my passport tells me I'm a Chinese American, but I just don't know where, like, it's almost like an interbeing, like, always like somewhere in between. So I just love these comments that you made, and people are commenting. It is so true. Brilliant.
I just wanted to say also what you're talking about, and it's something that I've written about before, is there is an anthropologist. There was an anthropologist named Arnold von Gennep, and he wrote about this experience called liminality, about being, and he describes it basically as a state of being betwixt or between. And in indigenous cultures, liminality, there were actual rituals for when people would leave one sort of fixed known stage of life, like childhood, and go and enter into puberty, which is very much a liminal stage where you don't know where you are, if you're coming or going, you don't know what your identity is. Everything that seemed fixed and certain is now uncertain and a bit chaotic. And I think our culture, and so many of us in the culture, are in almost this permanent stage of liminality. And I think that some people are the people who can be most attuned and aware of that and responsive to it. Like I would say yourself, I think that those are the people that are actually the guides and the teachers, because it's not about this sort of fixed body of certain knowledge, or these fixed practices, or these fixed jobs, or these fixed professions. It's about being able to ride the waves and being able to connect through the kind of the back and forth of it. And it is disorienting and it is uncomfortable, but if we can acknowledge that together and be accepting of one another in that space, I think that we tap into larger sources of our own creativity and spirit that in and of themselves have a problem-solving power that we can't imagine.
Exactly. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about uncertainty, David and I were talking about chatting earlier before the live show, like how uncertain our life feels right now, and just be okay with that and allow our inner potential and the inner self, inner genius to come out. Yes. And here's a comment from Robert. He was saying that, and I think he was referring to personalization and train his clients and personalize and build a relationship individually. Yeah, it's not a mass production, it's a really like one-on-one basis. Yeah. And just move forward here. And I know I have more comments here. And so you and I, David, we connect at so many levels. And one of the many levels that we connect is to be okay to show like that we are vulnerable and to show empathy. And so I know that you also talk a lot about those traits in your writing and in your live streaming. So can you elaborate more on those? And how can we, if at all, benefit from being vulnerable and showing our empathy, especially vulnerability? Our common sense tells us that is a sign of weakness, So how can we, if at all, benefiting from being vulnerable and showing empathy in today's day and age?
Well, I think first of all, you're right. I do feel a connection with you on that level. I mean, I tend to, and it tends to be just the way I am wired. I'm so actually I write about it and I talk about it as being important in organizations because, well, I do think it's important, but also I think that I have to also kind of affirm that for myself, because I have, like a lot of us, you have certain doubts and you have certain insecurities. And I often find myself going like, am I on the right track here? Shouldn't I be more certain? Shouldn't I be more sort of, heroic about this? Shouldn't I mean, I look at somebody like Tony Robbins and it's like, shouldn't I be more like that? And the truth of the matter is that's not me. And that's not the type of professional I am. It's not the type of consultant I am. It's, and I think that I don't have the kind of filters that I think other people have. When I feel something, I wear it on my sleeve. And for a long time, I felt very out of place. I think I alluded to this before. I felt very out of place studying leadership and organizations because everything that I saw had this sort of John Wayne Rambo type of quality to it, where you were saving the day and you were all knowing. And the truth of the matter is that I would get frustrated a lot because I would encounter situations where I knew that there was no clear answer, and it was obvious there was no clear answer. And there would sometimes be people in charge who wanted to apply a very clear answer to it. And I would be like, no, stop talking. That's just making it more confusing. And one of the things that I would see also when I worked in social service was that staff would get very uncomfortable, or they would feel confused because they would have somebody in a position of authority tell them that, it's all black and white. It's this or that. And their experience wasn't like that. And it would bring up a lot of emotions and feelings for them. And the truth of the matter is, I think today we have to go into that. We have to acknowledge it. But here's the thing that I think is important. It's because we have not developed models or ways of thinking about how to be in our emotions or in our spiritual life in organizations. There tends to be this sort of all or nothing thinking where if I'm going to be emotional, if I'm going to be empathetic, then I just sort of collapse into this puddle of emotionality and I let everything be okay. And I let, the house burn down and I just have empathy for the flames. And
Yes.
The matter is that I think what we have to do is we have to develop sort of these common sense blended type of approaches that acknowledge empathy, that acknowledge emotion, that work with it, that tap into its greater power, but at the same time provide structure that allows things to move forward in a constructive way. So if that's making any sense, I think that you and I, we have felt connected about that. But at the same time, I feel like the thing that you and I share too is our need for structure or systems in place that allow that unfolding to happen, that allow that emotion to come into, play.
Yes, yes. And Saba is here. Just want to say hi to her. And so here is a comment from Darren regarding what you were talking about earlier. And he said that all heroes, they have weakness, and that's why we love them. And I really agree. Like if you follow me on social media, you will encounter the videos I shared where I share my struggles, and every time when I share my struggles or exposing myself or making myself really vulnerable, I'm always showered by love and support and really amazing engagement. I think all of my social media posts, every time when I share my struggles or like expressing gratitude, I got the best engagement than sharing my wins, my accomplishment, and even my writing. And I have been blogging regularly, and the blogs that I have the highest engagement are those that I talk about my failures, my weaknesses, my mistakes, and my struggles. It is so amazing. I think humans we crave that, especially in social media. We always see the highlights, the success, the accomplishment. So when you hear voices like being vulnerable and showing empathy, it feels refreshing.
And I think it's more needed than ever, like I was saying before, because I think what we're doing is where the complexity of our challenges before us demand that. It used to be that things existed in these neat little boxes and problems were solved by this very kind of logical, sequential thinking, but it's not like that anymore. And I think part of the tension that we feel in the world and in our organizations and in our educational institutions is that we're continually confronted by challenges that are calling to our spirits, calling to our empathy, calling to our vulnerability to come out and really be part of the problem solving process. But we're sort of socialized to behave,
to oppress that.
And that really, I think what we're finding is that where we're going to start to find our solutions is in those little pockets of people who are like yourself, like this live stream, like this weekly show, where people are courageous, really courageous enough, authentically courageous enough to come out and share that part of themselves as part of their personal and professional life.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for being here, David. And speaking of which time, and we are fastly approaching the end of the hour, so I'm just moving forward here. And yesterday I listened to a podcast, and which aligns kind of well to what we are talking about today. And in the podcast, the host and the guest, they were talking about operating in our zone of excellence versus operating in our zone of genius. So operating in our zone of excellence means that we are doing something that we are really good at. And operating in our zone of genius means that we are answering our call. And we are doing something that is unique to our genius and to our gift and to our talent that nobody else can do as a good job as we are. So do you think everyone can discover our zone of genius, David? And do you think you are operating within your own zone of genius?
Oh my, those are some potent questions there. Well, I keep thinking about when you were saying that zone of genius, and And I'm thinking, what has been one of my influences to reach? If I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably for others. My wife can probably tell you if I'm in my zone of genius. But I'm thinking of the quote by Joseph Campbell. He would often advise people or his students to follow their bliss. And I don't know if I'm in my zone of genius right now, but I feel so deeply enthused and satisfied with the work that I'm doing and the path that I am on. And I know that other people get excited about the work, and that's wonderful and that's encouraging, but it's really my own sort of sense of personal, like being connection, of being able to connect the dots. But the one thing that I think is, you said, do I think can everyone do this? And I don't know if everybody can do it, but I can say this: if you want to do it, or if that's something that you think you're being called to, I think it also entails a willingness to undergo and experience lengthy periods of vertigo, and of uncertainty, and of confusion, and of self-doubt. Because I feel very blessed in that especially when I came to the end of my PhD, things started to make sense and the dots started to get connected. But I know that for a long time, I was doing things that interested me and excited me, but I didn't see the connection or the relevance to them. And it was only later, after the fact, that all of that started to fall into place. So I trusted the calling because I felt like I had no other choice.
I think this also relates to what you were talking about earlier, like, to really surrender ourselves, not always want to be in the control seat, but really surrender ourselves and allow the flow to happen and to see what is coming up next.
And trusting the larger order. And I think sometimes that can get dicey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope everyone in the audience can find your own zone of genius, because it is truly liberating, energizing. Every day you just feel like this is something that you are meant to do for your life, and that is such an incredible feeling.
If I could just add one thought, and I know we're running out of time, but something that just struck me as you were saying that, I think the only thing that, if I were kind of to comment on a zone of genius, I think it's not, what I'm just realizing right now is that it's not a personal attribute. It's something that only emerges in community and through sharing. Because I think of when you and I talk to one another, I always feel like I'm in that zone of genius, but it exists because of the conversation you and I are having. It's like, and when I head over to Wawa by myself, it's gone,
The synergy, that is truly amazing. Yes. So tell us one project you are super fired up right now, David.
Oh my word, I'm fired up for everything. But I can tell you what I'm doing is I'm in the process right now of launching my consulting practice. I left my full-time employment about a month and a half ago. So I am in the process of gathering organizational consulting clients. I'm doing the executive advising. And I am very excited about that. And it's all based on this model that I created through my research called Anchors and Sales, which has to do with anchoring people in the midst of confusion and uncertainty, and giving them, or giving organizations, sales or power to move forward amidst rough or turbulent seas. And it's all based on these relational qualities that I'm teaching leaders, and I'm teaching people in organizations, regardless of what their formal position is, to start to apply these principles in order to connect and become more resilient. So I'm very excited about that. I can't wait for more people to know about it and put it in motion.
Yes, congratulations, David. And I think I couldn't think of a better advisor than you. And definitely go educate those people and change our world, and create organizations that embrace our emotional well-being and our vulnerabilities, and accept us as who we are as holistic human beings. So one parting piece of advice, and how can we discover more about you, David? And we are going to say goodbye.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you where to find more about me is my website, and it's real simple, davidholzmer.com. And I'm on pretty much every social media platform under David Holzmer. So go check that out. And I've got a bunch of stuff at my website. And parting piece of advice is trust your instincts, even if it doesn't match up with what your head is telling you. Trust your heart and where it wants to lead you.
Wow, that is profound, everyone. I just love everything David shares. Let's give him more hearts and more likes. And thank you so much for being with us, David. You are truly amazing. Everything you shared is so profound. And I am just going to trust my heart more. And thank you guys for being here today. Without you, we are not doing this show. So you mean so much to me, and thank you so much. And see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.